Hello, everybody. Welcome into my latest live podcast, blog, digital video. I don't know. I'm trying to come up with something clever, but nothing's happening. So, welcome in, everybody. Today is Wednesday, February the 13th, 2019, and today I'm going to continue off from where we left off on this build, where I struggled in futility to get a cooler installed, only to find out the cooler's too large, not enough room for all of the memory. Now, we could have gone with 2 sticks of trying to think what we did here. 2 sticks of 16 gigs each to get to 32, but for some reason the client decided he wanted to fill all 4 banks. This actually will make your computer run slower by filling up all of those RAM modules. Probably nothing you would notice as a human being, but as a benchmark, you would notice it. The reason that is because this is dual channel memory on this type of a consumer-based CPU, and that means that it can work with a single RAM module, or it can improve performance with 2 modules, hence the term dual, right? D-U-A-L. And if you want to go to quad channel using 4 memory modules simultaneously, then you would want to step up to the higher end, more problematic, more fickle Socket 2011 series, you know, Threadripper type, super high-end CPUs that are really designed for specialty work, not for gaming at all. But that being said, it doesn't hurt anything to fill all 4 banks. But what it does, when we fill all 4 banks with 8 gigs each, in order to upgrade, you know, let's say to 64 gigs, then the modules have to come out. He doesn't have any room to upgrade anything because all the slots are consumed. And so we would have to vacate a couple of those slots, if not all 4, to upgrade the memory in the future. With regards to dual channel versus quad channel, there's a difference between running 2 dual channels versus running 1 quad channel, and that's why this will not benefit from filling all 4 banks. If you have the choice, only use 2. Take advantage of that dual channel memory, and then also leave the other 2 available so you can add more into the future. Now again, the difference is milliseconds, fractions of milliseconds probably. So it's not a big deal. This is just a technical answer for those who, there seems to be a large part of the viewers who only care about technical detail and don't actually care about the reality and the impact it makes in their real life. So that being said, I just want to provide you that information and you can do with it what you will. I would always go with 2 sticks of RAM just for the sake of keeping the other 2 banks free. Now, if we went with 2 sticks, we could use 2 of these channels without interfering with this cooler, but the minute the customer would want to add more memory, he would either have to remove the memory he's got and still stay with 2 modules, or he'd have to change this cooler out. So the cooler's a lot cheaper to replace than the RAM. You know, the RAM costs a lot of money. I've got the RAM right over here. And it's a nice RAM. It's a Corsair Vengeance Pro memory. You know, Pro adds a few dollars onto the price tag. And it's RGB and it's tall memory. Now, I am so upset with this is my first experience with a Be Quiet product that I no longer have any interest in looking at any other Be Quiet products. And the reason for that is they're not solving any problems I'm having. Why would I go to a Be Quiet power supply when I'm so thrilled and happy with EVGA, with Corsair, and with Seasonic? Why would I punish them for doing nothing wrong just to give this company an opportunity to take their business when they've already upset me? Right out of the gate, first time I've tried a product I don't need, by the way. I already have the cooler situation solved. For tower coolers, I have 2 preferences. I like the Hyper 212 EVO from Cooler Master. It's about $30. If the budget's a little bit more than that, we can go to $50, $55. Then I prefer Scythe's Mugen 5 cooler because it's a lot easier to install than this. Now that being said, I've installed these so many times, it's really not a big deal for me to put it in, but it's still easier to put the Mugen 5 in, and the Mugen 5 is a bigger cooler like this. But its mounting technique is much, much simpler than any other third-party cooler I have ever tried. So that being said, I'm done with Be Quiet products. You won't see me use them again unless I am let down. You know, if Mugen stops making the cooler, or it becomes impossible to get or too expensive. If EVGA or Seasonic or Corsair's power supplies, again, if the prices go up, if the quality goes down, or if they're just too difficult to get, I have no reason whatsoever to give Be Quiet a second chance, because they're not solving any problems I'm having. So you probably won't see any more Be Quiet products, even if they're good, right? Because I'm so upset by this. It's such a waste of time, and there's so many things wrong with it. Countless, well, it's not countless, but far too many things for the price. And if you can't tell, it really upset me because it's cutting into my time, it's cutting into my profit. And but this is how we learn, right? So I've learned, now I know, now we keep moving forward. And you know, it's a shame, because if I had a good Be Quiet product, I would probably want to use them again. But no, I'm done. Once bitten, twice shy. So with that, we're going to take this cooler off today, put the Hyper 212 EVO on. There's very common misinformation on the internet with regards to the efficacy of a CPU cooler with certain chips. Oh, that cooler doesn't work well on this chip, and that cooler doesn't work well on this. I don't necessarily believe any of that's true. If you're overclocking the machine, then you're going to need some excessive cooling. And I'm afraid you guys, some of you are reading about this excessive cooling demand from these overclockers and applying it to somebody who has no intention of overclocking. And quite frankly, if you're going to overclock, you really want a liquid cooler. There's really no air tower cooler manufactured that really competes on that level. So what we want is a quiet, reliable cooler that allows the CPU to function as it was engineered within its specifications of heat range. And so what I'm going to do is remove this cooler, put this cooler on. We'll get the motherboard, hopefully if there's time, mounted into the case, and fire it up, get the operating system installed, and run Prime 95 and just work it. You know, make that CPU get as hot as possible under extraordinary conditions that the customer would never ever do to the computer for the length of time. I usually do it for about 15 minutes, 100%. It'd be like putting your foot to the floor on your car and running it flat out for 15 minutes. It's unlikely you will ever be on a road or in a situation where that's an option for you to push your car that hard. So if you do have the opportunity to push your car that hard, safely and legally, and it can run through 15 minutes and it doesn't overheat and everything runs fine, it's probably going to take whatever you throw at it from that point forward, no problems, at least as far as anything solid state is concerned. Parts that move, they wear, and you know, the wear eventually results in failure. And that's part of the problem I have with the Be Quiet cooler, is it defeats the whole purpose of buying an air cooler, which is, in my opinion, the reliability aspect and the ease of which you can fix it. The only thing that's going to break on this is the fan, and this fan is a 135 millimeter fan. I don't know anybody who makes that size. We have industry standards for a reason, and when somebody steps outside of those industry standards as if to say they're better than everybody else and charges a pretty penny for it and pays a marketing company good money to brainwash you to think that you should pay more to get this as superior, it's not superior. It's inferior in far too many ways. And I just want you to know, in general, in this business, when you pay more, you generally get more, but not always. Sometimes you're paying for a brand. You're going to pay more for that Gucci handbag. You're going to pay more for the Coach purse. You're going to pay more for the Apple anything because it's got the name Apple on it. Same holds true for Sony. You'll pay more for a Sony TV of the same size and specs than you will practically any other brand in existence. If you see value in that, I can't argue with you about that. I know a customer who only buys Cadillacs. It's all he's ever bought. If you have that sort of mentality, I'm happy for you. But I have to be accountable and responsible and liable for anything that I sell. And I'm not comfortable with this at all. And it's far too time consuming for me to install it, and there's no benefit to spending that kind of money and investing that much time when other products are available, you know, that just don't put you through all that. So that's the logic behind it. I don't know, Be Quiet. This is my first experience with them. So it's not like I've had some predetermined, you know, distaste for them. I don't. but I do now. So anyway, welcome in everybody. Let's see who we've got hanging out in the chat just before we get started. And let's just take a look. I do want to remind people that my videos are free. If you're expecting anything special for you, or you are not liking the pace, I suggest you leave. The videos I do for free, and I do them for me, and they make videos that I want to see. And I know most of you have the same taste as me, but if you don't, please go. I'm mentioning it because I see some comments in the chat that are not at all justifiable. Now, if somebody wants to sponsor the video and pay me some money, then I'll be more interested in how you want the video made. But in the meantime, let me give a shout out and a thank you. This is going out to Franklin, and Franklin's been very patient and in allowing us to film his build. Not all of my customers want their build filmed because it does take longer to do it, and sometimes just for privacy concerns. You know, they're just like, hey man, I like you and I want a computer, but I don't want to be any part of that. But the people who do, I just think they deserve a good thank you and shout out. Because of them, we have content. Not because of some viewer who tunes in on free content and starts making demands about anything. So anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Let's give a few shouts out. Richard Wood says hello. Nick Poverman, Paul Baxter, Lotto Win, Michael Mancini says hello from New Jersey, Patrick Russo, Chuck Wolf, Mark Baggett, Dave Murray, Stealth Mode, and Torgo Zero. Also hello to Roman Cortez and Joseph Neal. Joseph, you should be a moderator. Let's make Joseph a moderator. Irving joins us from France, of course, and Rich Robbins here in my own hometown. Well, always good to see Rich. Corey Wilkerson, welcome in, Corey. You gotta love a guy named Corey. Ronnie Kravitz, hi Ronnie. Richard Bogan, good to see Richard. Magnum, hello Magnum. Donnie Seeger, of course, good friend Donnie Seeger. Kevin Perry, DJ Matrix 2310, Chuck Wolf, Dave Ruger, Vinny Vidi Vici, Philip Drake, Kevin Perry, Steven Bernstein. You know, Steven's been a generous contributor in making these giveaways possible. This is now one of those, but we're going to get back to the giveaways here very soon. Pete Unwin and El Perez, welcome in guys, as well as Jared Blackmore and Edwards25671, Daryl Holes, Alistair Collins, Eddie Casanova, Scott Hallinan, hello to Scott, and Mike Gunnell's Ministries. Jeremy Clayton, Kenneth Watt says hello from Iowa. Renee Kusin, Ken Jung, Daniel Stone, Kevin Sears. Did I mention Patrick Russo? William Dawson, John Craig, another friend of the channel. Well, I am assuming you're all friends of the channel or you wouldn't be here. Eddie Milne, welcome in. Who am I missing? Who am I missing? Tony Wallow joins us. Welcome in, Tony. And IZ. Vern Mahoney. Philip Musto. Roger Lee. Roger L. Gil Garcia. Welcome in, guys. Thank you guys so much for popping in. Of course, Catherine Anna Hauserman and Sharon Idle, welcome, welcome. Bo Hagren and Peter Brooks, Ken Masudik, Randy Kendrick, Radius704 says hello, Mario X says hello from the UK, and I think we're pretty well caught up here. So let's get some work done today, huh? I really just need to get this cooler off of here. I will reuse this cooler. It's not that this cooler isn't usable. It's just not usable on this configuration. And those limitations on coolers also are another discouragement from purchasing them. Much prefer a cooler that's more likely to be universally accepted on pretty much all builds versus coolers like this, which don't give any consideration to the builder. And if there's anything I can say that sums up my opinion on the Be Quiet cooler, it's that it didn't give any consideration to the builder. And that's the bottom line. The difficulty in how it was to install, the size of it, the inconsideration of its placement with regards to RAM locations on boards, the lack of hooks on the wire hangers, the size of the fan, the amount of thermal compound, the little teeny tiny amount, as if it was made of some precious metal. I don't know what they're thinking. They don't give you enough of it. The price is too expensive. It's just anti-builder. Like if you're a first-time builder and you buy this cooler, you may not want to do it again. So anything that goes against the fun of building, I'm not going to recommend. Chris's Tech Channel's contributed $1. Hey, thank you for kicking us off there, Chris. I appreciate that. And yeah, let's get the cooler off of here. So again, on a Hyper 212 EVO, we have these hard plastic clips that hold the CPU fan on. And here we have these wire hangers. Now, like on the Mugen 5 and others, there's like a hook and you push it down in a wade. I don't know how you're supposed to get these wire hangers off, but what I've been doing is sort of pushing up in a corner. I just don't know what else to do. Because again, apparently Be Quiet doesn't give a rat's behind about you, about the person who has to deal with it. Instead, people tend to focus on, well, look how good it performed. Well, you know, really? If the CPU is operating within its range of temperatures, then it doesn't matter if it performs better. It only matters if you're overclocking. And again, you wouldn't want to overclock with an air tower cooler. You'd want a liquid cooler for that. So let's see if I can figure out how this is going to come off of here, because I am sort of dumbfounded at how thick somebody has to be as an engineer or as a department manager to authorize this. It just shows a huge disconnection and suggests that they've never actually used it themselves. There's an expression you can look up. It's called eating your own dog food. You should Google that. It's an expression sort of made popular in the late 1980s by a Microsoft manager, and it refers to companies that use their own products. I don't think Be Quiet uses their own products. I really don't believe they would, because if they did, they wouldn't be designing this badly. But if anybody from Be Quiet wants to come on my channel and put a system together and show me how easy it is, they're welcome to come on. I would invite them any day of the week, show me how easy it is. And then I'll follow along and I'll use a competitor's cooler and we'll see who gets done first. And then we'll check our temperatures and we'll compare the price we paid. But tell us how you really feel. I just don't know how you're supposed to get this off. This is not good. You know, I don't want to bend these fins taking this off. And I don't want to scratch it up either. And I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to accomplish this. I'm sure if Be Quiet had an airline, they would only sell one-way tickets. And there's how you put it together, but how you take it apart, well, good luck with that. Just occurred to me why they're called Be Quiet. That's probably what they want me to do right now. It all makes sense now. I get it now. I'm a little slow sometimes. What if I come at it the other way? What if I take the hooks off this side? Ah, there we go. That is completely backwards, but just shows you how cheap these connectors are, that's even possible. Way harder than it needed to be. All right. I mean, if it takes that much effort, just get the fan off. My God. Horrible. Okay, let's get the here. Had really good coverage on the bottom of that with our compound, so that's always nice to see. Good thing I didn't have RAM in there. Ooh, did that again. Wow. All right. Wow, I actually took the standoff off with it. There it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all this in a Ziploc bag to use in another build in the future where it'll fit. I'm sure it'll work fine, you know, as far as the job of cooling goes. Just at much greater expense of time and labor than other products that will do an equal job without such limitations. I think that's everything. And I need to clean this compound off of here, so I'm just going to grab a paper towel. I don't need to polish it up or anything until I'm ready to use it again. So just to get the compound off, so it doesn't get all over everything else in inventory, you know. That's all I'm doing right now. And then I want to look at the CPU and make sure my coverage of compound is still good, whether or not I need to reapply. Normally you always want to reapply thermal compound. However, it's really something where you need to use your eyeballs and your judgment and determine if you have enough still on there. In this case, it's brand new compound. The machine's never been turned on. I see a couple of bald spots. So I think what I'll do is use the exact same thermal compound and spread it around a little bit more. That way, I make sure I have enough coverage. Never mix two different kinds of thermal compound, and never apply thermal compound to both the CPU and the heatsink, one or the other. It's hard to know where on the heatsink to apply it. That's why you don't do that. It's hard to know how much of the surface to cover. You don't want the whole thing because that's much larger than the top of the CPU. So when you cover the top of the CPU, then it just automatically matches up with where it needs to be on the bottom of your heatsink, and that's the logic behind that. The Be Quiet CPU cooler Dark Rock price in Norway is 776 Norwegian krona. Now, out of curiosity, what does that work out to in US dollars? Whoops. Let's see, 770. NOK to USD is about 89 US dollars. A little less, just a little bit less than 89. I'm going to round it up for ease. And that's about 20 or 30, $25 more than it sells for here. But your country may have tariffs that we don't have on imports, and that could also affect the price. Carrie, can you not use your old standby Intel fan cooler? The regular Intel fans are not going to be adequate to keep this cool, and they're going to be very, very loud. So the Intel fans work great on i3s and i5s. They don't work so well on i7s, unfortunately. And it would work, don't get me wrong. It would do the job, but not to my level of quality. Right? I want a machine that's going to run cool and quiet, not something that's the cheapest thing I can slap together because I don't have time to do it right. So the right tool for the right job. John Hayes says, greetings from Warrington. Ah, Valco. What's their slogan? Man, my brain's not working today. Valco is a funny, funny TV. People in America have seen a show called Superstore. It's kind of based, they don't admit it, but it is sort of based on Trolleyed. Trolleyed is a fictional store called Valco. And it's a very dry comedy. I love it. And I just never heard anybody from Warrington before, which is where it's supposed to take place. Use the Izuna cooler. I do have the Izuna cooler, and it looks like it would install fine in here. However, I really want to use the Izuna cooler on an ASUS Aura build, since it's ASUS Aura compatible specifically, which doesn't mean it wouldn't be compatible here with GIGABYTE's RGB stuff. However, I have an ASUS board with the Aura technology, and the Izuna cooler also has the Aura tech, and I think those two would be better matched for each other, and that's why I'm not planning on using it. Keyword, I'm not planning on using it. Jeff says, Carrie, you're missing the fun here in Michigan. We got 18 plus inches of snow last night. I bet it's beautiful. I bet the air is clean and crisp. Oh, man. I mean, you're all in the house anyway. What are you, watching YouTube outside? Come on. Who cares how snowy or wet? Oregon and Seattle will say, we got 18 inches of rain. I got 18 inches of dust, and it's all year. So you enjoy that snow. You go get your snowmobile, build a snowman, get a sled, get a couple of huskies. It's good fun. The dust, not so much. I'd rather breathe in snow. Eli said, if you really put your mind to it, you would probably do better on YouTube than him. Wow, that's very nice. How kind. You're damn right. It's nice for people to support one another. Serves you right. That's it. Thank you. Valco. Serves you right. I love the double entendre of that slogan. That's just brilliant British comedy, by the way. All right, let's take a look here. Before I apply the thermal compound to smooth this out, what I want to do first is get this back plate installed and ready, because otherwise it's just potentially a mess I'm going to create with getting my hands making contact with that, which also isn't good for the thermal compound efficiency. Dave Murray wants me to do the millennial thing. It's your boy Carrie coming at you. We are woke AF up in here. I don't know. It's wrong, man. It's wrong. Act your age. Make me. There, you want that? I better put these wire hangers in here, because that'll be a real bummer. I know I've got some of the other parts that belong to the Be Quiet cooler. The parts we didn't use are in the box. And remember I said there were 2 other standoffs. I didn't know what they were for. There should have been 4. 2 had rolled under the Lazy Susan, so there were 4 of those other standoffs, and they were in fact for a Socket 2011. That's why we didn't use them, but I was puzzled why there were only 2. But that's what happens sometimes when you get a bad day, you know, like I was having on Monday, obviously. Perhaps not at my strongest attention span, you know, watching stuff like that happen, because I'm so preoccupied with dealing with the bad things happening. JC4C7CJ7 Craig contributed $5. Thank you, Craig. Did I miss anybody else? Let's make sure. Let's make sure. The people who contribute, you know, I think they all deserve a a shout out. 677 people watching right now. Welcome in, guys. Welcome in. Sharon Idles contributed £1. Guys, check out Sharon Idles' channel. Check out her page, her web page. She's got some really good electronic dance music. Check it out. If you like that kind of music, you will love it. How often do you recommend changing the thermal compound on a CPU? There's no real time limit. It kind of depends on how often the system's in use. A computer that's on 24/7, the thermal compound pretty much stays viscous for the most part. But if it gets cold and hot and cold and hot, and if you're in a humid climate or a dry climate, if you're in a dusty climate, a lot of that impacts the efficacy of the thermal compound. So with that being said, if you had to just pick a number, I'd say once every 5 years. The shame of it is when somebody goes, I was watching a YouTube channel and they said you should change your thermal compound every 12 months or some ridiculous thing. And in the process, they break something. So they took a perfectly good working computer, right? I want you to really listen to what I'm saying. They took a perfectly good working computer. They, in the spirit of trying to make it better, even though it wasn't having any problems, they saw some YouTube channel or read some article online. And in the process of taking it apart to clean off the old thermal compound and reapply new thermal compound, something bad happened, and now the computer's no good anymore. I've done that myself when I saw a video a few months back where a guy was using a heavy tripod instead of a proper gimbal to keep it level as he was walking or running. And I said, wow, that's really cool. I want to try that. And I went outside and held the heavy tripod with a $1,000 camera on top of it, and I wasn't watching where I was going, and the cement kind of went down like this for a driveway, and my foot went down expecting there to be cement under there, and it went further than I was expecting, and I went off balance and cut the crap out of my hand. I tore a hole in the side of my shirt, and I busted the side of my camera. I mean, the camera's working, but that's still not healed right today. Now, if I never saw that YouTube video, this hand would be in wouldn't look like it does today. So I want you to be very cautious and the information you're getting online. And if you're going to do something as technical, as taking apart, it's like open heart surgery to change thermal compound, right? Getting these coolers off and back on again. If you're not a technician, you haven't done it a bunch of times, is it worth the risk? I mean, unless your computer's overheating, your fans are running really loud, or you're replacing the cooler entirely, I don't know that it's worth it. Under the right circumstances, it is. Donnie Seegers contributed $2. He says, I like the flower. Oh, that's my wife's, I don't know what it is, but it's in bloom. It's real. And Jamar Marichal has contributed $5 Canadian. He says, yep, there's me, Carrie, all for a Coke a day. Very nice, thank you. That's Sharon Idle's website, buggerallon.tv. Buggerall, it's all one word, buggerallon.tv. Check that out. What else? War One has contributed €1. Thank you for that. Thank you guys again for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. It really helps. It does help to make more content more often, better quality, all that stuff. Somebody's got to pay for it, and it ain't YouTube, I can tell you that. All right. Backplate. So to do this, I need these 4 standoffs, 4 nuts, the nut driver, there's thermal compound, but I'll just use the open one I've got. And the rest of this we don't use. This is for adding a second fan onto the cooler, which we're not doing. The other screws there are also for that, and these little rubber pads, which are for, isn't that interesting? The little rubber pads are supposed to go in this little pocket, and that pocket is empty. Well, we're not using them anyway, but that's just interesting that that's missing from the, oh no, no it's not. They fell out right here. Okay, you're okay, Cooler Master, you did good. Christoph Ash has contributed €5. He says, I missed Eli and Carrie, I will catch up on that one. You know, I have to tell you, I didn't know really what to expect, you know, with regards to how much time Eli was going to have or the types of questions. I knew what he was going to start with, but I didn't know where he was going to go with it. And just very flattered by, you know, his professionalism. He's a very good interviewer. I guarantee you I will not be able to interview him as well as he interviewed me, but I'm going to do my best. And, you know, he let me talk. He didn't interrupt me, and that's going to be a challenge for me to return that. But I need to keep that in mind when he's answering. I need to keep my mouth shut and let him talk. Verugian Klustian has contributed $1, and Adam Sleeth has contributed $20 Australian. Thank you, Adam. You are moderator now, Adam. Thank you for that contribution. Robert Jones, thank you for your kind words. I do appreciate it. Look, man, all I can do is be honest, right? And if people are going to beat me up over being honest, I don't want to live in their world. You know, the world's filled with phonies, so I have no interest in that. No shortage of those. They're everywhere. So be different. All right, so I want to get this back plate on here first and foremost. So I've talked about these back plates before. You'll see there's this green adhesive sticker type thing on the bottom. Do not peel that off. On the other side, you'll see it's just in the corners. That's because it mounts this way for AMD and this way for Intel. And this is where it's touching your motherboard. We talked about that and the really thoughtless design that Be Quiet uses. This is much more intelligent in that it makes sure that there's not going to be any metal-to-metal contact between the bracket and the back of the motherboard. And so on AMD systems, you know, it's a different mounting platform, and so that's why this much is covered. And these are far away, these will never touch. But this way, these touch, but everything else won't. So that's what that's for, and so make sure you leave it on there for that reason. Rudiger Luthi's contributed $5.55. He says, hi to Carrie, mods, and chat. Well, hello to you. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right, but it looks like Rudiger. John Sautier has contributed $25 via PayPal. He says, keep up the good work. Well, thank you, John. AJ says, great interview with Eli yesterday. Really enjoyed the content over the past 6 years. Always supportive. Well, thank you, AJ. And moderator status for AJ. Anybody like that isn't going to attack me. I appreciate your support, man. I really do. All right. So I got to put these little diapers on these standoffs. I don't know why. All other Cooler Master Hyper 212s that you see me install in videos from like last year or before didn't have these little diapers. So I don't know how critical they are, but we've got them. And I don't have any other use for diapers. Do you? Don't answer that, I don't want to know. And so those are just going on like that. And then I'm going to take the board, try and hold it as much as possible by the edges. Alistair Collins has contributed £2. Alistair, thank you for that. So we're going to take and hold the board. You'll notice there's, on the socket, there's 3 screws that hold the socket in. There's 2 up at the top and 1 on the bottom. And if we look at, try to do too many things at once, I lost my feed here that I can see, so I need to flip that back. There it is. Okay, so again, if you look, there's 2 screws at the top, 1 on the bottom, and if you look on the bracket, there's 2 on the top, 1 on the bottom, and that's how you know the proper orientation for the bracket. Now the bracket has 3 different positions the screw can fit in, and I believe we want the middle. Is it the middle? I'm sure the documentation would tell me if I'd read it. I think we want the middle one. So I'm going to just try and hold that together while I grab one of these standoffs and put it in. And then we can line that up. Wiggle it around as need be to get that to fit. And then I can start one of the little nuts on here just to hold it in place. And then I'll do the same thing on the opposite corner, and then it should just hold in place for me for the rest of the standoffs. So it's getting the first 2 started is the most difficult. Once the first 2 are in, then like I say, it kind of naturally holds it into position there for you. There it is. Yep. You'll see I'm not using any tools at this point. I will use a screwdriver here in a little bit, but for right now, we don't need any tools. There's that. And then finally, right here. Now, what's nice is Cooler Master gives you this little socket. See, I already got thermal compound. I already touched it in doing this. That's why you don't want to put the thermal compound on yet. Anyway, so that's going to go over one of the nuts here, and then we just use a regular Phillips screwdriver to go into this end to tighten those down. So if you have you don't really want to use a socket. It would be too easy for you to crush the motherboard with just too much leverage on a socket wrench for that. If you have a nut driver you'd prefer to use that's this size, that of course will do effectively the same thing, but Cooler Master is giving you everything you need to do the job, as long as you have a basic Phillips #2 screwdriver, which you're going to need for your build anyway. Now, all the screwdrivers you see me use in my videos are in the video notes if you want to buy one. Anything that links you to Amazon, I make a small commission from. Anything outside of that, I don't make any money. If you see links that aren't pointing to Amazon, then whether or not you purchase it I have no idea. It doesn't impact me one way or the other. So if you want to support the channel, anytime you shop at Amazon, if you click on any of my links in any of my videos that point you to Amazon, once you've been taken to Amazon from my link, you can make any purchase at all, related or unrelated to the link. As long as my link took you to Amazon, I make a small commission, and you don't pay anything more or less. It's the same for you. So it's a good way to show support if you're going to buy stuff anyway. But just so you know. Now, I did slightly touch that thermal compound, and if you were really, really uptight, you could just wipe it all, clean it off, and go through the whole rigmarole. But the truth of the matter is, it probably won't make one iota of difference with regards to the performance of the thermal compound or its longevity. If I smeared it all over, a different story, which is a little touch. But if you want to, you can. It's not a big deal to me. It'll be fine. So what I want to do is just add a little more of that thermal compound, and I want to use the same thermal compound I was using, which came from a previous install of a Hyper 212, because they didn't give me enough on the Dark Rock, if you were watching the other day. And I just thought that was ironic that I had to use a competitor's thermal compound on a cheaper cooler. And I'm just going to probably just finish that tube off that I have, which should be this one right here, I think. think this is it. Yeah. So we'll just put a little bit more, not much, just a little bit more on there. About as much as they gave us for the whole thing. And then I want to grab a rubber glove to just spread that around, paint it. Let's think of finger painting. And for that I use these nitrile gloves. These are not rubber gloves. These are nitrile. Nitrile gloves are electrostatically safe against static. We check it to see if it's clean. You know how you can tell? You just go like this. Ooh, it's very tacky. That's interesting. All right, that looks pretty darn good. And I flip the glove inside out so I don't get stuff all over me. But now you can take a look at that coating and you can see we've got a nice even coating. Got a little bit there on the bracket. That's okay. I mean, if you want to wipe it down, you can. Nobody's ever going to see it. It doesn't make any difference. But if it makes you feel better, you can get a little Q-tip or and be careful if you're using a Q-tip because you don't want to leave little threads behind. Then you'd be better off just leaving it alone because that would make it worse. So I'm going to leave it alone. I think that's going to be a very common theme here on my channel is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I do encourage education, but not at the cost of losing equipment or damaging equipment. Okay, so now I can place the CPU cooler on top. I need to take the fan off first because the screws that have to go down in this, one of the screws is right under the fan. And you see, we don't use those wire hangers. You see how we have this plastic, sturdy plastic connector and we just pull it off very easily. And it also allows us to, install the fan as high as this just for extra RAM clearance, which isn't going to be a problem because the heat sink's nowhere near as wide, right? If we line those up, is that level? We have an extra ½ inch or so on this one, which, of course is going to result in better heat dissipation, but as long as we stay within the engineering specifications of the temperature range that it was designed to run in, running any cooler than that doesn't really benefit you. There's a piece of protective film or tape at the bottom of the cooler, and that's to keep this free of any contamination. Contamination means things like dust, dirt, debris, oils from your fingers, skin. So only remove that when you're ready to install the cooler. The top does say Cooler Master, and if that matters to you which way it, if the Cooler Master is upside down or not, the fan can go on either side. In fact, fans can go on both sides if you want. And it works equally well this way as it does this way. So if you care, then pay attention to that when you're installing it. Then we've got this little scissors bracket here, and it's got a little nub on the bottom of it. You see that? And then there's a little hole in the center. So for a lot of people that can't get these coolers to sit right, it's because when they installed it, somehow that little nub came out and they didn't realize it. And after they tightened it down, it's kind of sitting crooked and the cooler won't sit right and it isn't going to cool as well. And that's what makes this cooler a little more difficult to install. Now, if you look at the bracket, you'll see it's sort of bent in right in here, and it kind of bends out on this side. And so we could close it up this way, or we can close it up this way. And the instructions show you they want you to close this around the heat pipes in between these two bends, right? If we do it this way, they sort of hit the heat pipes. It can't close right. So when you put this in, you have to think about, okay, which direction do I need to go? If I go this way and I open this up, I can't fully open it. I need this to go the other way. So that means I have to rotate it 45 degrees, which means closing it this way and putting it in like this, so that it appears that these are sort of hugging the pipes. These brackets sort of wrap around these pipes, and then we insert that peg into the hole. And I shouldn't be touching the bottom. I just realized I just touched it, but that's okay. It's all right. And then when we put this down, like I said, we can put it down this way with the Cooler Master logo facing me, or I can put it this way with the Cooler Master logo away from me. It's personal choice. There's no right or wrong on that. This will then just set right on top, and then I can start one screw right here and then go to the opposite corner and start that screw right there. Oh. Don't turn them too much or they'll be really hard to get the others started. Now, make sure that that little peg still sits in that hole. Otherwise, you're gonna not be happy. So check that now. The cooler should move just a little tiny bit and stop. That ensures that that little peg is in the hole in the mechanism. There's a little bump in there that prevents the cooler from just spinning around in circles. And now I can tighten down, or at least get started, the last two screws. The screws have little springs on them which may have to be moved into the proper mounting hole, which I'm not sure is it the middle one on these. Should have did that before I started. Looks like we're on the inside. Inside, 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 and then inside there. There are 3 positions the screws can go into, and I think I need to be on the middle one. You should be reading your directions on these third-party coolers because they're not obvious. And if we just look, it'll tell us based on the socket which of those 3 hole positions on those screws we should be looking at for the CPU that we're using. So it says right here for LGA 115X. So 115X means 1150, 1151. This is a 1151. It wants us to use the center hole. At least that's what it looks like, right? So we want to make sure that in the center position. But we can still do that, I think, without having to take the screws out. It's easier if you take the screw out. Just sort of lift up on the screw until it falls into that next position over, and then we can go to the next one and make sure that they're all in that center position. And in doing so, that little nub that fits down in the hole, it's all gonna come out, and I have to recheck that again because I didn't think about that before I got started. So I'm gonna move all these to the center hole because they were all on the inside. If you fail to do this, you're going to have a hard time getting everything to sit flush and to line up properly. See, now what I just did right there was seated that little nub back into the slot. And now we can get the rest of these started, and they seem to be lining up a lot easier. You saw me struggling a bit before, and now the screws are lined up perfectly with the standoffs below. So it makes a big, big difference that things like this, the choice of positioning is selected correctly, and that you don't just take it out of the box and slap it on like I just did. Now, you don't have to worry about that if you buy a cooler that's specifically designed for Intel Socket 11.5X only. But this will work in Socket 2011, it'll work on AMD, numerous AMD sockets, and numerous Intel sockets. So you have to choose the right position and the right standoffs, because they give you extra standoffs because different socket types require different types and lengths of standoffs. So the benefit is you don't have to worry about buying the wrong cooler. when the cooler accommodates all those different kinds of socket types. Makes purchasing the cooler a lot less complicated. But if you bought a specific cooler with a little more research that was designed specifically for the CPU that you have, then you wouldn't have to worry about that. You could take it out of the box, slap it right in. You wouldn't have any extra parts afterwards. Potentially. Now what I'm doing is I'm tightening down these screws on the bracket, and I'm going opposite corners, and I'm trying to tighten them down in a level way so that there's not one, you don't tighten one all the way down, and then you start them all and you sort of work your way equally opposite corners until you get them to stop turning. You know, just work yourself around it, double check your work. And you can see that took me far less time to install than this monster. And then we can put the fan back on it. And the fan is going to plug in here on this white connector. There's a white plug and there's a white connector on the board right here. Well, it's kind of a gray. That's going to plug in right there. And that's for the CPU fan specifically. It's a little bit different in how the BIOS reads it, but it looks and acts like any other fan header. But if you don't have something on here, your motherboard may not start because it'll say, I don't see a fan, and it's going to be harmful to your CPU. So for your safety and the safety of the equipment, I'm just going to shut off until you resolve whatever that is, why there's no fan there. So that header is specifically important if you want your machine to fire up and not turn itself off right away. Now I'm going to line this, the plastic holder of the fan, try and get the fan aligned to the top, and then you just kind of close it like a door, and it snaps on. Now look how much room we've got with this cooler and our RAM. You think we're going to have any problems putting our RAM in? I don't think so. And if the RAM comes up a little bit tall, we can raise this fan up a lot higher than we can raise the Dark Rock fan. So it's just a lot more features, a lot more options, and cost less money, easier to install. Regular fan, if the fan ever goes out, you just buy this fan anywhere. It doesn't have to be Cooler Master. It could be made by anybody, Noksho, whoever. You just replace the little brackets and the little rubber sticker that I remember I said was in the package here. Those little rubber, that's to prevent vibration and noise. And you're done. That's the only maintenance you would ever have to do to this cooler, apart from maybe changing the thermal compound after a number of years. Mods, please do not hide. Well, that's okay. In this case, you can hide. When somebody says something that's just vulgar, you can hide them. That's fine. So in this case, it's fine. Let's take a look. Did I miss any other contributions that have come in? Gainsy95 said, Carrie, that flower is an amaryllis. If you say so. He's contributed £5. Hey, Gainsy95, thank you. Jonathan Mayperry also has contributed £5. He says, I loved the Eli chat, Carrie. You know, I took a look at the Eli chat and I just saw the same people posting over and over. There's some really sad people. Really, I feel really bad for these people. They're crying out for help, and people don't recognize what they're doing. But it's just such a cry for help. I just wish I could help them. Anyway, I think I got all the contributions here. So thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. My Coke is a little bit warm, so let me finish that off and grab another one here real quick. And while we're doing that, I want to get a zip tie, and I want to cable manage this now before I put it in the motherboard. And I might think about putting these, there's a 8-pin and a 4-pin, so a total of 12 pins on the CPU header on this board. And when you buy these socket 390s, you've got to be aware of that when you're purchasing your power supply, because most power supplies will give you a 4-pin. They give you 2 4-pin CPU headers. That's our CPU power connectors from the power supply. And you need an additional, on top of that, you need an additional 4-pin, I think they call it EPS power connector. It's They do make them, but you have to pay very close attention to which power supply you're purchasing to make sure you get that extra one. Now, the motherboard will work without the extra one, but supposedly it'll work better, especially in overclocking situations or really high demand situations. It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. Randy Kendrick says, thermal pasta. Somebody wants to know why so little Ryzen processor builds. Remember, I'm only building what customers order. So you'll have to ask customers why they order Intel over, I can't answer that. I don't know. I can promise you if you order something from me, I'll be building it. And if you want to order a Ryzen because you want to see it, be happy to build it for you. We've certainly built other Ryzens on the channel before. So remember, different people have different needs. Not everything is equal. Whoops. All right, that's good. And I need to get a nylon zip tie. So what I try and do to make this as neat as possible is I take these stickers and kind of wrap them around the cable itself so they don't stick out like an eyesore. And then, let's see, we'll wrap this one around too. And then fold the cable in on itself so it's straight and not crooked as many times as necessary to get it to the length that is as short as possible without being too taut. Because if it's too taut, then it can fall out or be not seated. It could be difficult to seat properly. So you need a little bit of slack in there, but not so much that your cabling looks sloppy. And let's see, this one's, you know, we could go with a bigger loop so we don't have to wrap it as many times, but then it doesn't look as good. And then I'll need 2 cable ties instead of 1. But cable ties are cheap, so don't worry about that. So I think I'm going to start right there. So we'll grab 1 cable tie and put it here. And then we'll grab another cable tie. That one there. And then I'll grab my wire cutters and I'm going to cut those little cable tie pigtails off of there. I like to get as flush as I can because if you leave a little bit of that sticking out and you run your hand against it, you're reaching in there, it'll cut you. Now I can plug this back in. And you can see already it's much, much cleaner looking. Remember, that's going to be the top of the case. Nobody's ever going to see it. And if you have to work on it, it's going to be very easy to pull that off or to replace it or do any maintenance or work. So it makes it much easier to work on, and of course it looks a lot better. Now, finally, I should be able to get the RAM installed, and for that we've got this, as I previously mentioned, Corsair Vengeance Pro. This is DDR4 3000 megahertz And that's what that looks like. There's specs on the bottom here if you guys are interested in the part number. It's all right there. And they have little windows in the packaging so you can see the actual product ID and stuff of what's inside. Now, when memory is sold in pairs, that means it's been tested to work together in a pair. So we should install it into the sockets that are paired together for that reason. I don't want to mix two different packages of RAM like that. So what I'll do is, if I'm going to install in this socket, which is the one I'm the most concerned with because of its proximity to the fan, I want to make sure that that's the first one I install and not the last one because of that. And it does run right up against the fan, but it's not sitting crooked or anything. It's, well, I suppose it might just be a little tiny bit, but it shouldn't interfere with us. And then I want to seat it all the way down. And once it's seated, you see it straightens right out. And now the question is, do I want to raise this fan up to get it away from here, or will it raise high enough up, or should I just leave it be? Also want to make sure that the fan is fully seated into the heatsink here. I do believe the Mugen 5 would actually be a better fit here. The only concern I would have is any noise or vibration of the fan rubbing up, you know, the frame of the fan vibrating against the RAM module could create noise. So we're going to find out. And then because, as I mentioned, these are tested in pairs, I want to skip a RAM socket and go to the next one because that's how dual channel works. That is one channel, and these two that are paired together will be paired on the same channel. Now that shouldn't make a difference when you're buying the same RAM all at the same time, coming from presumably the same batch. But it also doesn't hurt you to just be a little extra cautious either, right? So we're just going to put in the last two RAM modules into the last channel. Well, the last dual channel. So once again, orient the RAM in the proper direction, slide it into the socket. Make sure those retention levers are open before you do that. And then use your thumbs, push down one corner, then the other corner, and then repeat that with the last module. And so that is what it's going to look like when we're done. Now, as you can see, it's a tight fit, but that's a lot further than we got with this monster because it wasn't going to fit at all. Now, another solution other than the Mugen 5 could be, you know, someone mentioned the i7 from Scythe. That could potentially work. I'm afraid that it's not going to cool as well, but I'm basing that on the weight of it. And also, we could go to a liquid cooler, which is just going to put a water block right on top, and then we'll have all kinds of room, crazy room. The problem with using a water block is it's probably going to have to be completely removed and replaced. In the case of an all-in-one cooler, it's factory sealed, and those pumps die out after about 4 or 5 years. This is going to somebody who's disabled and may not be able to change that themselves. So really don't want to go to an all-in-one cooler unless we absolutely have to. They aren't necessarily going to be able to change anything themselves, and it would be an expensive process to pay somebody to do this for them because you got the cost of the part, cost of the labor, and if they screw it up, you know. So I much prefer to build a machine that never ever has to be repaired during its reasonable lifespan, which is about 8 years. Russell says, would it be smart to attach the CPU power cable before anchoring the motherboard? Potentially, yes. I was mentioning that I might consider doing that, but as I look at it, it shouldn't be a problem getting into this spot right here. Sometimes I've run into heat sinks that go over the way, or I run into cases that are too short. This is a big case, and the problem with putting the cables on now is messing about with them so that they don't get in they don't interfere with the install of the motherboard. And it's not typically how I do it. It's really your choice. If you want to do it that way, nothing wrong with that. That's what I love about showing people how to build computers. This is just one way. The order of what I installed, I could have been changing the order. I didn't have to put the power supply in first. I could have saved it for last. So absolutely, absolutely. It's how much work you want to do. Whatever feels easier to you is the way you should do. Let's clear some space. Let me grab another Coke, which I was about to do. The elixir of life. Oh, it's cold. I don't care if it's not good for me, because it makes me happy. A lot of things that make me happy are not good for me. Now that I think about it. I'll have people in the chat that be like, you shouldn't be drinking that Coke, it's bad for you. And they're like vaping. They're drinking alcohol. Thanks, buddy. All right. Let's see. I think I have room for the case here. Don't need these parts yet, so we'll just set these down right here for now, and then let's bring the case over. I'll tell you what I like about this case is it's very roomy. And so the types of hardware and peripherals that you can add in here are much wider ranged than a cheaper case. It's also very well built, very solid, it's attractive. We've got standoffs already installed, which is beautiful. They should already be in all the right places for the full-size ATX board that we have here. That's generally 3 standoffs across the bottom, 3 across the middle, and 3 across the top. It's a total of 9, and that's the standard. They can be removed with a 5mm socket and moved around, if necessary, because we can put a micro ATX case in here, we could put a mini ITX. Mini ITX would just use 4 bolts, 1, 2, 3, and 4, I think those are the ones. Or maybe it's these 2 and these 2. It's really super easy, and this would be kind of funny when you open it up and you can see a little mini ITX system right in there, a little motherboard. Anyway, it's very versatile, that's all I'm trying to say. Now what I need to do is lay this down. I'm not going to get the overhead camera out. It's a real hassle to set it up. So this only takes a minute anyway, and you guys have seen it a million times before. If you need to see that, I do have several other videos where I show that detail. But I'll tell you what I will do. I'll move this way so you can see the I/O shield lining up. Because this motherboard, you know, the high-end motherboards have the I/O shields already built onto the sides. And then that makes the install, I don't know if it makes it easier, but it's different. You know, you're lining up the whole I/O shield instead of individual ports. So you don't have any concern about the ports not lining up with the holes, but it can be sometimes a bit of a struggle to get the whole I/O shield component to line up with the cutout on the back of the case. And this cable for the fan is just right in our way, so let me get that out of the way. Okay, and then I should be able to slide the board forward if the I/O shield's lined up, which it is not. So I'm looking at, again, it's not necessarily easier, but it's different than a typical motherboard. And I think it just said that it did. No, it didn't. Couldn't be that lucky. There it is. That's it. So we'll just double check. We got kind of a gap right here, which is weird. Just right here, I don't know how well you can see that. There's a little gap. Don't know why. But let me check and make sure the mounting holes are there. and lined up. They look lined up. Oh, that gap's better now. It's still a, so here's the problem. If there's no gap there, then it has to snap in, and it's, boy, that's tough. So this was easier to install because I think they made the I/O shield just like a half of a millimeter too small all the way around. That's what I'm guessing, so that it can slide more easily in and out. And if that's what they did, I'm all for that. It's not an airtight system, you know? We don't have to worry about leaks, so it's fine. It's fine. It's better than fine. It's well thought out. So again, the case, the Phanteks Enthoo case, I really like how they give us this little container with all the different screws, and they're all in their own little compartment. Oh, my OCD is happy and tingly because they're the only manufacturer I know that does this, and I really like it. And I like that you can use this well after your build, whether you choose to keep screws for your case in there or you want to use it for something else, but it's not something you're likely to trash, which I like, right? Because the plastic Ziploc bags they normally include go right to the landfill. Well, they will degrade after like 2 million years or something. That will probably take just as long to biodegrade, but hopefully it'll give you a lot more usage rather than, you know, the few seconds of ripping it open and taking the screws out of it. So what I'm going to do is start these screws here in the motherboard. Normally I'd recommend you use a mechanical screwdriver for this. I'm trying to figure out which of these screws I'm supposed to use. There's only the fine threaded screws that seem to be available in quantities that we need. And normally motherboards mount with the coarse threaded screws. So let me see if this will even tighten down. Yeah, it tightens down. So it's using the fine threaded screws that I normally use on solid state drives, DVD drives. They don't normally use them for the motherboard, but apparently Phanteks has decided it's a very common screw that's used, like I said, on solid state drives and internal DVD drives. So if you're asking me, well, how did I know in that container what led me to that screw first? Quantity. I need 9, and there's really not 9 of anything else, but there's big thumb screws. I know the motherboard doesn't use big thumb screws. I see these big fan screws. Fan screws are huge. So I know I need a smaller screw in a quantity of 9, and that was the only thing in that container that matched those requirements. Now normally I just start these screws. I don't tighten them, but the board is sitting so well in the case, I've got confidence. You'll hear the screwdriver automatically shuts off. That's not me shutting it off. The screwdriver has a clutch on it, and I've set the clutch to a setting of 3, and it's tightening these screws down to the same exact torque specification, which is not required, but it makes me feel good. I like consistency, right? So if something is bad and it's consistently bad, or if something is good and it's consistently good, then it's going to meet what I expect it to do. When you have one tight screw, one loose screw, like when I'm working on something as a tech, I'm like, did somebody forget to tighten this down, or why? You might have a screw you have to struggle with to get it out, or it might be so tight that it takes the standoff out with it, and that's a hassle. So I have found the setting of 3 on my cordless driver to be perfect for this kind of work. But if you're building a computer for the first time, you definitely want to just turn these by hand. Don't over tighten them. You can crush the motherboard. It's just there to secure the board and prevent it from moving or vibrating loose over time. So you want the screws to be snug, but you don't torque them down. Now what's interesting is typically there's a center post on the standoffs to help align the board, to seat the board, which this has, but this center post has a hole in the center of the center post, so it also takes a screw. That's pretty cool. It's definitely overkill. You don't need 9 screws to hold a motherboard in. Probably only need 4 or 6, and even that would be a little bit much. But if you've got the mounting holes and you've got the screws, there is no harm in over securing it. Now let me stand the case up. You can take a look at what I've just done here and see what this looks like. Lighting isn't the best here, is it? So we've got 1, 2, 3 screws there, 1, 2, 3 screws there, and 1, 2, 3 screws there. So I got all 9 in there, and I've got extras left over for, as I mentioned, solid state drives and DVD drives use those same screws. So if they only gave me 9, I don't know how I'd mount everything else that I would need. So the Phanteks does a good job here. It looks like they're giving us some type of mounting screws here that are extra. I just realized that just now. Probably for mounting 3.5-inch drives down in this cage down here, maybe? No, because we put a drive in there already. They're obviously there for something. One of you guys in the chat probably knows what they're for, but they're not doing anything there other than just being stored, which is interesting. Something must, I don't know. It must be used for something else, and they're just there as spares. Dell and HP like to do that. They'll give you the extra screws screwed down into some panel on the case, which if you didn't know what you were looking at, you might think they were holding something in, but they're just a storage place for screws, which is weird because they gave us that storage container, so why wouldn't they be in there? I don't know about that. We're not going to install any 2.5-inch drives, but if we wanted to, we've got a space for 2 back here behind the board where they can be tucked away, out of sight, out of mind. And then we've got, I imagine somehow these can be used for mounting solid state drives. It looks like there's a little plastic piece here that comes out that says Phanteks. There's a little screw. Not quite sure how that works, but don't need to know because I'm not using it. Again, I'm sure reading the instruction manual would clear all that up. And while you're doing that, I'll be building a 2nd and 3rd computer. Now I can hook up the motherboard power, so I'm going to open up the power cables here that I've got in the Seasonic bag, and I'm going to look for those CPU power cables because I need 2 of them, as I mentioned. You'll see it says CPU right on the edge of it, and of course that's the part that goes to the motherboard. And then on the Seasonics, the part that plugs into the back of the power supply is this one. What would happen if I did it the other way around? Well, it won't plug into the power supply. The connector's too fat. These clips, there's 2 of them. Here there's only 1. And if you could plug it in backwards, what happens when your motherboard only needs 4? You can't split this in half. But this side is split in half. So that's how you know why it's important one side is labeled as the power supply. Because you look at it, you go, well, aren't they both 8 pins and aren't they both the same on both sides? Sort of. And I need 2 just like that. So let's see, that's a video power, Molex, SATA, floppy drive cable, SATA, video card. Ah, here it is. So those are the 2 we're going to need. And we'll start here. All right. Now, it doesn't matter which one of these I do first, if I want to put the single 4-pin or the dual 4-pin. Bose Peters contributed €2. He says, thanks for the great live streams. Nice flower, by the way. Everybody's loving that flower. Be sure and let my wife know. This is a very dark, it's sort of like working in a cave at this point, so it's very difficult to film. I can barely see in there, it's so dark. So one of the things, obviously, that you miss on through the internet a lot of times is the clarity of what the camera can deliver. So what I want to do is just plug that one on there. See, it's pretty easy for me to reach my hand in here. The case design really makes a big difference in how difficult or how hard something will be like this to put on. And I'm just realizing that if I put the big connector on first, it may be hard to get on the inside of it for the smaller one. So I'll put the smaller one on first. The clip on almost all boards will go towards the edge of the board. Some boards, very rarely, will move that, so don't assume. And if you get it right, you shouldn't struggle. It should just click right in place. And then I'm going to run that out through this hole in the back. Fan cable just keeps getting in my way of everything. Now I could take the fan out if I want to, but that would probably be too easy. There it is. And I'm just going to pull that all the way through this wiring hole. That's what that's for. I need it to go right down here back to the back of the power supply. But first I want to put the other CPU power cable on. This is the, like I said, I think it's called EPS. That's what that connector is referred to on the power supply. So when you look at the power supply specifications, that's what you're going to look for to see what sort of EPS power connectors it has, because it needs to have it needs to have 12 pins total, which is usually 2 cables that are 8 pins each, and the 8-pin cables are made up of 2 4-pin cables, right? So we're using all 4 on one, and I'm sorry, all 8 on one and just 4 of the 8 of the other one. It doesn't matter which cable I use on which connector. They're both the same as far as the EPS power cables go. Having a board that requires more than 2 of these is fairly unusual. And it does tend to only exist on the more enthusiast level, higher end. So when you think of, you know, spending your hard-earned money, you really got to ask yourself, is it worth the extra expense and time involved in complexity in building? And will it benefit me in the way that I'm going to use the machine? And for most people, that answer is no, it's not worth it. But there's a small percentage of enthusiast builders who enjoy that extra challenge, and those are also the more technical people who are more likely to make YouTube videos and jump on Reddit and places and advise other people they should think like they do. But that goes along with a certain mindset, and if you don't share that mindset, you probably don't want to be taking their advice, right? Because it just doesn't fit your lifestyle and your needs and expectations. Probably, but that's for you to decide. So now the next problem I'm going to run into is getting this other cable up in there. Let's see if it's going to be any easier. Because that wiring hole doesn't seem made for 2 of these. There it goes. It's tight, but it fits. And then we can just pull those right through. And I'll worry about making it look pretty when I'm done. But I want to make sure everything works first before I go to that extent. You don't want to spend a whole lot of time painting a model that you're putting together until the model's complete, right? Learned that a long time ago in model rocketry. I was sort of into that for a long time, and spend all this time painting it, making it look pretty, and then you go to launch it for the first time and it blows up on the launch pad. Whoops. So probably shouldn't have spent all that time sanding and polishing. Probably should have given it a test flight first, then painted it. Yeah, I learned that one the hard way. That's new. All right, so the two EPS cables here are going to plug into the back of the power supply. And sometimes this is easier to do with the power supply already out of the case, but this doesn't look too bad. Looking on the back here, and it does show that there's 4 connectors, 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, where these can go, and they're closest to this side, which means trying to get anything on the other side once they're in place will be difficult. So let's do the motherboard power connector next, because it's got to go on the inside. And then once that one's plugged in, then we can plug this one in beside it. MJE has contributed $5. Says, keep up the good work. Well, thank you. Okay, so coming back around this side, we can look, and obviously this is the wiring grommet we want to use right here for this cable. So I'm just going to move the other cables out of the way and just shove that right in there. Get on in there. Now these grommets do have a habit of sort of coming out. If they do, they just sit right back down pretty easily. Don't let that discourage you. See, I kind of got caught up on that one little cable right there for some reason. Why did that happen? Who knows? And then we'll plug this in right here onto the large connector on the motherboard. It only goes in one way, connector closest to the edge. I've never seen that any other way. It would be hard to get this connector back off of its plug, or the plug out of the connector, if this clip was on the inside. So that is typically the way it's done, and that's why. It's not just random. Okay, now we can pull the slack through and run this down into the back of the power supply. What's that supposed to go to? To motherboard CPU fan. What? I'll look that up later. I'm not worried about it. I'm guessing that's going to power these 2 fans and the rear exhaust fan. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. That's 1, 2, 3. 1. Yeah. So that's the rear fan. These are the 2 front fans. How was that supposed to reach all the way? I think this doesn't have to go on the CPU fan header. I think it goes onto any fan header. That's weird. You're weird. I'm telling Mom. Okay, those 2 are on, and I'll plug these 2 on now. And that's going to fill the whole top row on the Seasonic power supply. That every connector on the top row is going to be used. And that means the choice of where we can plug the remaining connectors that we need will be a lot easier. There won't be so many choices, because you'll only be able to work with what you have left. I do believe we can plug this onto any fan header on the board. I don't know why it's specifically labeled to go into the CPU fan. That's just really strange to me, because you want the motherboard to control the CPU fan separately than all the other fans. That's the critical one, the CPU fan. And the motherboard BIOS will base its speed and performance on the temperature. We don't need all these other fans doing the same thing. If there's more heat coming down here, then this fan should be fast spinning higher. If there's more heat towards the back, which would be more CPU fan related, then we'd want that one to turn on. But it looks like they're all three going to operate at the same speed. And that should not be, in my opinion, based solely on the heat of the CPU. I don't believe that that's a good design. However, I'm not even going to hook those fans up at this point. We want to make sure we can turn the machine on and that it boots up and we can get Windows installed. And then we can consider putting a graphics card in it. Because we can run the GPU off of the CPU. We've got an HDMI port right here we can use in the meantime, and that ensures that if something isn't working, all those items we haven't yet installed, we don't have to diagnose because they're obviously not a part of the problem. If we have any problem, once we resolve those problems, then we can move forward with adding all the additional items. And then if things stop working, then you know it's nothing you did prior to that, and now you can diagnose just the last items you've added that have caused the machine to malfunction. So your diagnostic is so much faster, it's so much less stress. Take it easy, slow down, enjoy your build, and verify your work along the way. And so that's what we're going to do right now. All I have to do at this point is just give the board power. I've got a few connectors I can plug on if I want to. We've got our front port audio header, which typically goes somewhere in this corner, this bottom corner of the board. On this board, it looks like it's right here. And there is a cutout. You gotta love a case that gives you a cutout for the audio header, man. You gotta love that. And how you wanna route the cables up to you. We'll just run that right up through this hole. Every case should have that hole. I'm telling you, man, that's brilliant. The problem is, most cases aren't this wide, and so there's no room. If the power supply goes up against the motherboard tray, there's no room. But this board leaves a good 2 inches between the edge of the power supply and the back of the case. How many other cases have you ever seen, especially here on this channel, where when I'm describing how to put the power supply in, I'm pushing it against this motherboard tray? Not so with this design. So this is a superior design with the thought of the builder more in mind. Well, at the same time, it's also a very attractive and a versatile case. So they kind of check all the boxes in this design so far. I haven't found anything yet I don't like. I would like to have 5 1/4 inch bays or 5 1/2 inch bays for card readers, DVD drives. But I guess I'm old. What does he mean he guesses? Does he have a mirror? All right, let's see. What is this? Power switch. So I believe they also have a cutout right here, right by the front panel connectors, and that can go right up through here. And that's going to connect on the second set of pins, second pair of pins, top row. Skip 2 pins and plug it on the next 2 pins to the left. What else do we have? This is power LED. Power LED is also going to run right up through that same wiring hole, and it's going to go right beside that power switch with the negative cable closest to the power switch connector and the positive cable then on the last connector on the edge. Again, top row, top row. So let's take a quick look. One of these is positive and one of these is negative. If you get them backwards, it won't hurt anything, but the LED will not function. Let's see. Positive and negative. Sure would be nice if that was just like one connector you could slap on. And NZXT is the only one I know that does that. But there are some boards where they don't follow the standard, which is just, again, there's a standard in the industry, and for a manufacturer to go around that standard to suggest what they're doing is superior is very disrespectful to the builder. You're making the job more difficult for the builder, and whatever the justification the manufacturer is using is probably related to expense. Probably is cheaper for them to engineer the board that way, or they just hired very inexpensive engineers who aren't that skilled. And don't let that surprise you either. A lot of companies will hire people who really shouldn't be in their positions, in my opinion, but they were willing to accept what they were paying, what the company was offering for payment. And so you end up sometimes with people in decision-making positions who really have no business being there, in my opinion and in my experience. Okay, 2 connectors left. That's the hard drive LED and the reset switch. Really should have put those on first because they go below those 2 connectors that I just put on and makes it hard to see. But let's just take a quick look. That's the reset switch. It's going to go directly below the power switch. Now I do have other videos where we show these connectors in extreme close-ups. I've just gone ahead and pulled those other 2 wires off because I can't see with them in the way. Hard drive LED, positive cables going to the left all the way to the first 2 pins horizontally closest to the left edge of that whole connector. And now I have to put the power and LED and switch back on, which just take a second here. How many times have I done this? 2,800,403. But who's counting? All right, those connectors are very, very loose. I don't know why they're so loose. Now at this point, we should have enough of everything hooked up to turn it on. I could slap that USB 3.0 cable on just because it's so fast and easy to do. This is what that looks like. It's a very unique connector. It only plugs in one place on the board, unless your board has 2 USB connectors, in which case either place will work equally well. This board, the connector for this is right here. So I can come in through the bottom of this grommet to here, or from the top of that grommet to here. I think the top of this one, since it's empty, will give us the least resistance and will make the cable management look a lot better. So I just want to pull this out of its... Phanteks has sort of included it, cable managed, and I'm going to get it out of there. You don't have to keep it that way. That's just how they ship it for their own convenience. Don't assume that that's where it's supposed to be. And then there's a little notch, and you just line up the notches so that it plugs in only one direction, and it's a friction fit. It's just going to snap right in there. It's a horrible connector. The USB 3.0 connector is one of the worst design connectors they've ever done. It's big. It doesn't have any sort of a locking mechanism on it, and the leverage, or the fulcrum of it, as a result of the small socket, makes the plug very easy to damage the socket and also to fall out from its own size and weight. So really, the engineers dropped the ball big time on the standards committee for that, and they should have known better. But it's going to be replaced soon enough. You've probably seen the USB 3.1 connectors on some boards I've done, and it's 1/3 the size. It doesn't lock in either, but it seems to fit in tighter, and it's smaller, and so it doesn't have as much leverage or fulcrum points to cause it to potentially damage the socket itself or fall out. I think now we're ready to give it our first test fire. So what I'm going to do is grab my keyboard and mouse, which I have right here. There's a little dongle. Most wireless mice have a little place to hold the wireless dongle so you don't lose it. And I can plug it into the back or the front, but by plugging into the front, I am simultaneously checking the quality control of the USB ports to see that they're functioning properly, that I've got the connector on and that they work. Don't assume anything, especially if you've got to ship it to a customer. The last thing you want to do is have to drive out to a customer's location to plug something in. I'm going to drive in my car for 45 minutes to go across town because I didn't take the time to make sure something was plugged in correctly by testing it. Like I say, that's the best benchmark, really, is just use the machine yourself. Running software as a benchmark is, in my opinion, foolish. You might want to run just to see if, you know, a benchmark to see if you're in the right range of where you should be if you're suspicious of the performance, but not to exacting numbers. Just get you in the range where you should be and you're good enough. And then beyond that, make sure that it performs as you would expect it to, and that's your benchmark, right? Now, I just need a video cable. I need an HDMI cable, which I have right here. This is the Twisted Veins HDMI cables. I get these off Amazon. I get everything off Amazon. And this is it's an attractive cable. It's got a nylon loom around it, which is nice. Because I'm plugging and I'm unplugging them all the time. My cables are really abused. And I haven't had to replace any of these yet. And by plugging this in back here, this is going to feed directly into my video capture card, right into your monitors at home. You're going to see this better than I can. How cool is that? Now, I think we're ready to turn it on, right? So we've got the keyboard and mouse, we've got the monitor, and we've got power. I'm going to flip the switch here on the back of the power supply. Right back here, I'm going to flip that on now. It was off on purpose. Last thing I want to do is have sparks or smoke coming out when I'm plugging connectors in. And if you've ever been, you know, shocked by power coming out of their wall, it hurts. And it can kill you, but it also hurts. Right up here is our power switch. And so what I'm going to do before I hit the power switch is I'm going to flip over the input on the video capture card to the secondary input while simultaneously keeping the primary input up in the corner, right? That's me on the primary input. And so we'll just click on this button right here, and that's what that is. So now primary input is right here. Secondary input is all of this. It says no signal because the machine is off and it's not giving it any signal. Hit the button. CPU fan is turning. It's hard for me to show you the other side because the cable is preventing me from rotating it around. The other fans, like this fan, is not hooked up, so it's not supposed to turn. The only fan I should see turning is the CPU fan. The RAM is very pretty. Let's see if I can get this to spin so you can see it. Yeah, it's going to be difficult. Now, your first boot may take a little while. The system has turned on, it's turned off. Now it's turned itself back on again. And what it's doing is it's saying, what CPU do I have? What RAM do I have? I've never been turned on before. So it may cycle off 2 or 3 times. It's cycled itself off twice now. Do not panic. Give it up to 90 seconds. There it is. There it is, our first boot. And that's what you want to see. And it's going to have nothing to boot to because we have no operating system installed. We just have a brand new M.2 drive. It seems to be resetting itself here. So again, I should see like an error message once it's done whatever it's doing right now. It's sort of waking up from a coma and saying, where am I? What day is it? What year is it? What time is it? What's plugged into me right now? What's this RAM and what's this CPU? And it should be doing that. And then it'll settle down, the fans will quiet down, and we should get a boot error that it's not booting, that there's no bootable device. There it is. Clear CMOS information. BIOS has been reset. Now the system seemed to have cycled a number of times, which does seem to get a little disconcerting, but you just really need to be patient. If 90 seconds goes by and nothing's happening, then something's wrong. But don't wait 10 seconds or 20 seconds and just assume something's wrong. Now we can also upgrade our BIOS at this point. Let me get rid of me out of the corner so I can read what the screen says. Let's see, system. Our BIOS version is F3, so we're on a Z390 AORUS Ultra, and if I go to Google and type in Z390 AORUS, wrong keyboard, Carrie. Z390 AORUS Ultra. Then what we've got is the GIGABYTE website is the very first link that appears. I know you can't see it, so just take my word for it. And then I click on the support button, and I can see what the latest version of BIOS is right now, which it says is version F7F. And that was released on the 16th of January, which is obviously much newer than what we have. So I'm going to download that zip file and extract the contents here in my downloads folder, and then I'm going to copy those contents onto a blank, very small flash drive. This is a 2 gig flash drive, and I'm using the streaming computer. Obviously, you need another computer to do this, right? And I prefer to do it before the operating system is installed to make sure that all of the benefits of the BIOS are being acknowledged by the OS. You can do it afterwards, or you may even choose to not do it at all. The latest BIOS addresses problems, and I always put the latest BIOS on to avoid experiencing the problems to begin with. Instead of waiting for a problem and then upgrading the BIOS, I'm trying to avoid ever experiencing the problem to begin with. So what I've done is I've copied the main BIOS file onto this flash drive. Now, if I plug the flash drive in right now, its system probably won't see it, but let's give this a shot. So here's the little flash drive that's got the BIOS file on it. Plug it into any USB port. And then we can go here in the BIOS to, let's see, it should be a function to get into QFlash. There it is. Update the BIOS. It does. So normally I've been accustomed to having to shut the system off in order for it to recognize a flash drive. With an operating system, you don't have to do that. But when you're in the BIOS, sometimes you do. I'm happy to see now, it seems like we're evolving. The engineers are allowing us now to not have to reboot. And we're going to do the intact BIOS flash. And a lot of people on the internet that used to be around 20, 30 years ago doing this would warn you about all the dangers of it. But this is so simple. As long as you don't lose power or interrupt this process, you're going to be fine. You'll see we're in version F3 now, and I don't have to download version F4 and F5 and F6. I only have to download the latest BIOS version, which in our case is this F7. And yeah, it tells you here on the left that our BIOS version is F3. That's our current flash. And then our updated flash down here is the F7F. This older BIOS has a date of August 24th, 2018. And the new BIOS has a date of 1/16/2019. So that tells you in those 5 months they've released 4 different BIOS updates. So you only want the latest BIOS update. So we'll give that a minute. Let me give a shout out to some contributions since I haven't been paying attention to you guys. I apologize. Night Owl's contributed £5. He says, keep up the good work, Kerry. I'm loving the build videos. Hey, thank you, Night Owl. Scott Hallinan has contributed 10 New Zealand dollars, and thank you for that. Shout out to Scott Hallinan for contributing and supporting the channel. So the system's automatically reset itself. Everything's running like it should. We'll see a signal here in just a minute as the new BIOS takes effect. It may shut off 2, 3, 4 times. Leave it alone. Again, give it about 90 seconds. It shouldn't take 90, but give it up to 90 seconds. And when we go back into the BIOS now, it should say we're on version F7F. But don't touch anything, leave it, and wait for the error message. An error message will come up. Now again, after 90 seconds, if it doesn't, that's a different problem. Now this time, it didn't put us into the BIOS. It tried to start loading an operating system, but the flash drive, the M.2 drive we've installed is not formatted. And the hard drive we installed, we haven't cabled up yet. I don't even want to worry about cabling the hard drive yet, because when I go to install Windows, it'll say, which drive do you want to install? And that can be confusing for some people. So why hook it up? Let's just leave the one drive in. When Windows goes to install, it'll only have one drive to install to. And once Windows is installed, we can shut it down, assuming everything's working, and then we can add the second mechanical drive, and we can load back into Windows and partition and format it in Windows. And if something stops working, then you know something you just did between when it did work and when it stopped working. Something you did is probably the cause of that. But we can go back into the BIOS right now and just verify we've got the right version. So I'm just hitting Control-Alt-Delete on the keyboard. I'm going to hit delete, the delete key over and over. That should get me into the BIOS. And we want to just make sure that our BIOS version is F7F, and it does say exactly that right here in the upper left corner. It recognizes the i7-9700K running at 3.6 gigahertz. It also verifies we've got 32 gigs of RAM installed and how that RAM is installed. And we see our CPU fan RPMs are being monitored and correctly displayed. We've also got CPU temperature and all that other nonsense up here. We can look to see what's installed in PCIe in M.2. The M2A socket says it has a Samsung 970 EVO 500 gig NVMe drive running at PCIe 3.0 times 4 at 3.0 times 4 speed, and that the other two sockets, which are called M2M and M2P, that's how they're labeled, they're empty and therefore not available or not applicable. And we can turn Rapid Storage Tech if we want on. That's really for SATA stuff, which well, maybe for the hard drive we can do that later. XMP, which is the extreme memory profile of this high performance memory, can be enabled or disabled. Profile 1 is the automatic profile assigned to the SPD chip on the RAM modules itself. Whether or not you want to turn that on at this point is up to you. The problem, if you turn it on now, is if your computer has a problem, it may be that the RAM is incompatible with the board in the XMP mode. And by turning XMP off, it may run just fine. And if you do your research on the board manufacturer, you can see which memory modules they've tested and verified. It's called a quality vendor list or QVL list. They can't test all the RAM. And the older the board is, the harder it's going to be to find the RAM they tested, right? So ideally, this really shouldn't be a problem if all the standards are being followed. But unfortunately, manufacturers take liberties thinking they're making things better and creating problems in the process. So I normally wouldn't turn the XMP profile on at this point, but because we're dealing with such high-end components, I fully expect it to work without a problem. But if I have any problems, the first thing I'm going to do is turn that XMP profile off. Clear? I hope so. All right, so now what I need to do is right down here, it says save and exit F10. Are you sure? Yes. Okay, so that's going to save the change that I just made, and it's going to boot up one more time, and I don't need to wait for it to boot up. I am going to just hit the switch on the back of the power supply, and I'm going to shut it down. Just for a second, I want to see the post screen come up to make sure that I'm giving it enough time to save those settings, and in just a moment, it should just, there it is. Now I can shut it off. Okay. I'm going to pull this flash drive out that has the BIOS on it. I'm done with that, and I'm going to erase that BIOS file. We'll never, ever use it again. And I'm going to grab my other flash drive that has my Windows 10 on it, and we're going to plug that in. Once again, we'll find any USB port. I think these are USB 3 on the back. I can't tell. There's black, there's yellow, and there's red. Typically, USB 3 is blue. I don't have any blue connectors. These red ones are USB 3.1, so let's just do that. And we're going to turn the machine back on, and it's going to try and boot again. And the only thing that's bootable is that flash drive. So it should just automatically boot. I have to hit the switch on the power supply back to the on position. Now I can turn it back on. And everything should just happen automatically, and you just follow the on-screen prompts, and Windows will be installed. We go to Windows Update, we hit all those Windows updates, and then we can finish the rest of the build. Now, I intend on continuing the rest of this build tomorrow because I'm already running out of time. But if anybody has any questions for me at this point, this will be the time to ask, and I'll do my best to provide you an answer while I'm waiting for Windows 10 to install. I don't have a product key at this time. Never install Windows 10 with a product key. I'm going to be using a product key for Windows 10 Pro. I already know that, so I'll click Next. And I'll accept the license agreement and click Next. It should see, always choose Custom Install. Always Custom. And there's our 500 gig Samsung NVMe drive, so hit Next. And now Windows 10 is going to partition and format that drive. A lot of Win says, hey, thank you, Carrie, for today's show. Well, a lot of Win, thank you for joining me for today's show. And Steve Devine is saying thank you. Greg says thank you. Thank you to all of you. Thank you so much. And what did I see? Somebody said they bought a computer from me somewhere in here. It kind of scrolled by real quick. Sometimes the chat room gets super busy. If you want to give me a shout, tell me where you're watching from. I always love to see that. Gary, did the customer buy an open box power supply? I asked the customer that and they weren't really clear with me. They didn't really say yes, they didn't say no. So I think they unintentionally bought an open box. I think at the time when they made the purchase, they thought they didn't pay enough attention. I think they saw a good price. But the customer hasn't shown me the receipt and hasn't really openly admitted it one way or the other. They just said, hey, if it works, use it. So that's what we're doing. All right, so we're going to do our first restart right now, and it should automatically restart from the NVMe drive instead of from the flash drive. We can pull the flash drive at this point. It's best to not pull the flash drive while the system's on. So as long as it boots like it should, we shouldn't have to worry about it. Peter Brooks says he's watching us from Wales. Oh, one of these days I'm going to visit Wales. I'm so jealous you get to live there. Gerald says he watches us from Ohio. Catherine Anna Hauserman in Cartagena in Colombia. And Guy Aldrich is here in Phoenix with me. How very cool is that? What else do we have? North Texas, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Canada, California, Texas, California, Michigan, Ohio, North Yorkshire, UK, New Jersey, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. 24 Viper watches us from Michigan. Arto Rasinen joins us from Finland. And we've got Hemmet Hempstead in the UK and Germany. Christoph Esch watches us from Germany. Caracas, Venezuela. That's where Juan Mendez watches us from. The Ricky G joins us from Scotland. And David Walsh from Northwich, UK. Let's see. Stephen Bernstein joins us from Florida. Philip Musto from Westchester, New York. And Gary Kane from Long Island, New York. Patagiotis Grammatopoulos is joining us from Athens, Greece. Mark Baggett joins us from Massachusetts. Lotto Win from Dallas, Texas. Mihai joins us from Romania. And Martin Christensen from Denmark. Ken Musudik from Wisconsin. Snakebite watches us from Lafayette, Louisiana. And Rambo46R watches us from California. Sergio Cochet joins us from Lisboa, Portugal. Steve Devine in Peachtree City, Georgia. Floyd's Ghost watches us in Aurora, Colorado. Steve Larkin is also in the UK, along with many other members here. Alan is in Montreal, and Greg is in Florida. Catherine says he did not buy the power supply open box. Well, you don't know that, Catherine. You know that you gave him a parts list, but you don't know that he ordered, because he ordered some things different from your parts list, didn't he? Or did you actually speak to him? Seth Harris watches us from Florence, Colorado, and Iceberg is in Seattle. Jim Desposito, Virginia. Sharon Idle watches us from Salisbury, Wiltshire, in the UK, obviously. Maggie watches us from Sweden. Stealth Mode watches us from St. Augustine, Florida. And Rich Robbins, of course, here in my hometown in Arizona. Well, not my hometown exactly. He's in Chandler, but still a suburb of Phoenix. Boss Peter watches us from Barcelona, Spain. Now I got that Freddie Mercury, Montserrat Cabell song in my head. Barcelona. Don't sing. Nobody wants to hear that. DJ Matrix watches us from Moscow, Idaho. Take that, Putin. Speaking of Putin, have you guys ever seen Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits? I used to like him before he turned into Vladimir Putin. Is it just me, or is that the same guy? Let's get Vladimir a guitar and see what he can play. What else we got going on? Solmar joins us from Denmark. Rick Lakes in Minnesota. Wheels is also in Minnesota. Michael Eady watches us from Wilson, New York. And Nigel Barrett, that's a very British name. That's watching from, it's got to be, near Warrington. We're back to Warrington. Okay. Velco. Every time I see that, it's all I can think. Serves you right. Cor van de Poort joins us from the Netherlands. And let's see, Roosevelt Welcome watches us from Lake Charles, Louisiana. Matthew watches us in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Frank Pearson watches us from Batley, West Yorkshire. And Bert watches us from Norway. #1 fan of Mark Knopfler. Yeah, he's a talented guy, but man, does he look like Putin or what? Is it just me, or is that dude? There's a neat video on YouTube. It's got Sting singing backup for Money for Nothing with Mark Knopfler on lead guitar and vocals. Phil Collins is on the drums, and Eric Clapton on guitar as well. It's a pretty cool setup there. All right, so at this point, I'm just going to select United States. I can't believe how fast that installed, right? This is all live. You saw it's been waiting for me this whole time. I'm yabbering on. Alex L7's contributed $14.99 Australian dollars. Thank you so much. This board has Wi-Fi, so we're not going to do that. So right down here in the bottom corner, they kind of hide it from you. We're going to hit skip for now. And it says, are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. Who's going to use this PC? This is going to Franklin. That's a good name, Franklin. You don't really meet many Franklins. It's a very noble and distinguished name. We'll hit next. No password. And we're going to decline Cortana at this point. No on this. And we're going to turn off all of this. They say, wow, that computer's quiet. Well, I only have 2 fans running on the computer right now. We've got the Hyper 212 EVO fan and the power supply fan. That's it. But it's dead silent. I mean, yeah, I can't hear it at all. Ramek72's contributed $2. Thank you, Ramek. Andrew W. watches us from Scotland. Wow, MDD1963 says, greetings from Okinawa, Japan. I don't get many Asian or viewers from the Asian countries. That's wonderful. It's awesome. John Hayes says, there's a lot of Brits on here, Carrie. Yes, there is. And they're all welcome. Burlington, North Carolina from Jimmy Bateman. And Sean watches from Steeple, Ashton, UK. Mark MC joins us from Belfast in Northern Ireland. Martin Christensen says, I just donated 100 Danish krones through PayPal. You do a great job teaching us. Thank you, Martin. And moderator status for you, my supportive friend. Eddie Casanova says he watches us from good old Philadelphia, home to Hall & Oates, among many other musicians. Just ask Mike Smith. He'll tell you all about it. Let's see. Visayas Ramus joins us from Latvia. Rick Astley is from Warrington. I didn't know that. Or are you Rick rolling me? Frank Pearson says he watches from Batley, West Yorkshire in the UK. Matthew says he watches us from Parkersburg, West Virginia. There we are. There's our first boot. Gary Kane's contributed $10. Hey, thank you, Gary. Gary's already a moderator. Appreciate your continued support. Now I can eject this flash drive because we're done with it for Windows 10. You see me use the same flash drive over and over again. Let me just eject that real quick. Should always safely eject or shut the machine off, or you can cause corruption to your flash drive. Now, if you don't care, I don't care, but just so you know, you still have to do that. That requirement has not gone away. I'm trying to get the machine to rotate around so you can see the pretty RGB RAM in here. Let's get you a better camera view. Let's go to the main camera now. you know, it's so bright, the camera's having a difficult time picking it up. Let me cut some lights. Is that working any better? Not really. The camera is not picking that up well at all. Vanderpoort has contributed €5. Thank you for that. Yeah, it just looks white, doesn't it? But it's all different colors. And the problem is, so there's I've got a fixed white balance on this camera, and what it's doing is it's, because I was tired of the camera changing the brightness back and forth. Paul from Mars has contributed $5. He says, great interview with Eli. Sounds like you need that studio sooner rather than later. Can't wait for part 2. Yeah, I'll have Eli on in the next week or maybe 2 weeks. I'll have to talk and schedule it with Eli, but I will do my best to interview him as well as he interviewed me. I'm going to try, oh, you know what I need to do? I just need to zoom the camera in. How about that? That should fix the lighting issue. Now you can see all the pretty colors. What a difference that makes, huh? It is pretty. Funny, when the lights are out, it looks brighter in here, or is it just me? But that's expensive RAM too, so you're paying for those aesthetics. Unicorn puke. Okay, sure. Okay. Gary Kane contributed $10. Did I say that already? Thank you to Gary for that. I got everybody who's contributed. So let's give a quick shout out to everybody who's contributed. Paul from Mars and Cor Vanderpoort, Gary Kane, Ramix72, Alex L7, Scott Hanlon, Night Owl, MJE, Boss Peter, Gainsy95, Jonathan Mayberry, Alistair Collins, Rudiger Luthi, Virgin Kalustian, Christoph Esch, Adam Sleeth, War1, Jamar Marshall, Donnie Seeger, Sharon Idle, JC4CJ7, Craig. I'm just going to call him Craig. Chris's Tech Channel was the first one who contributed to today's live stream. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. So I am just really running out of time. So what I'm going to do, here's my plan. Tell you what I'm going to do. I got the rest of the parts in for the judge's computer. The judge is ordering a second computer, and I have told him I'm going to start his computer as soon as this one's done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this up for today, but I'm going to try and leave it and just don't touch it until tomorrow, and we'll be able to put the rest of, hook these other fans up, which is really the fan controller in the back. We'll put the graphics card in and get it cabled and powered on. I got to go to Windows Update. Maybe I'll do Windows Update and Windows Activation and drivers tonight, because you guys don't need to watch that, right? And I'll just do the rest of this tomorrow with regards to the rest of the hardware. And then, of course, the video driver will go on after that. And then we can run some benchmarks and see how the how the EVO 212 is cooling this CPU. And we'll determine if this is an adequate cooler for this CPU. Because it's a high-end CPU. It's, probably going to run the hottest. And I do believe in past experience that people have doubted this Hyper 212 before. And it just has always performed far better than people have expected it to. I think it's going to be fine, but there's only one way to know for sure. And before I ship it to the customer, I need to know for sure. So we'll find that out tomorrow. Stay tuned. Last chance for any questions I'd be happy to answer before we wrap it up. Did I get my laptop working? With the camera, I haven't had time. Maybe tonight, maybe. Rich wants to know if there's any vibration from the fan touching the RAM. Nothing, not at all. Do you hear it? Because I mean, I don't hear nothing. And I'm standing right by it. I can hear the refrigerator. Dustin Fuller's contributed $5. He says, great job as always. Hey, thank you, Dustin. Make sure Dustin's a moderator. Dixie wants to know if I send you a Coca-Cola luggage tag, would you use it? Yeah. I mean, I don't travel very often. My wife likes to tie like a ribbon around the handle, but I would use a luggage tag, sure. Am I taking my wife out for Valentine's Day? So here's the thing. Valentine's Day is this corporate made-up holiday, and everybody does it. So all the restaurants are crowded. It's noisy. It's the furthest thing from romantic. So my intent is to take my wife out regularly so that we don't have to have a special day for it. I prefer to not even, my preference is to not even go out to any restaurants between tomorrow and Sunday, because people who are saying, I'm going to avoid the crowds on Thursday and Friday, so I'll go on the weekend, it's still going to be big, big crowds. So once we go and hit Monday and anything beyond that, restaurants in Phoenix are super busy on Friday and Saturdays. I don't know how a restaurant in Phoenix goes out of business. It doesn't make any sense to me, because when the main restaurants, when they have an hour and a half, 2 hour wait for a table, people decide they'll eat at the other restaurant close by, even if the food's not as good, because they're hungry and they want to get in and get out. So when those restaurants can't even stay in business, something's seriously wrong. There's a YouTube channel called Hot Ones. I don't know if you guys ever watched it, but they bring on celebrities and they have about like 10 chicken wings, and each one's hotter than the one before it. And the interviewer interviews the guest while they eat a wing, and give them a few minutes to cool off before they move to the next hotter wing and see if they can sustain all 10 wings. And so they've had guys like Gordon Ramsay on there, and Alton Brown, I mean, Terry Crews, and just a lot of famous people on there, like the Jackass guys, Steve-O. They had Key and Peele, right? Those two guys, they came on together and they made it a thing that they weren't going to drink any water or milk or anything, and all you have to do is take a bite, but they're eating the whole wing. That was the challenge. They had to eat the whole wing, and the host rather, he went along with it. It makes me want to do something like that too. It seems like a lot of fun. I don't know if I could withstand it. Detroit's not known for spicy food. Living out here in Arizona has kind of given me a little taste for it, but I don't think I could handle it. But watching Gordon Ramsay just insult the chicken wings, and they had Ricky Gervais on, and Ricky's a vegetarian, so they made vegetarian wings, and the host ate vegetarian wings right along with them. It was very cool, and it's interesting to watch people sweat and to see the effect it has on them. And some people tap out, and you know, there's sort of an amount of pride in just suffering through it. And while you're suffering, you're being asked these really thought-provoking questions about their life, their career, or whatever. And it's something to watch. It's very enjoyable. It's called Hot Ones, and you might want to check it out. It's a pretty cool YouTube channel. Ken says you don't want to do this. And Elle says, yeah, don't forget Chris D'Elia. Yeah, Chris D'Elia was on there. A lot of people don't know who he is. I was trying to think of famous people. I mean, Chris D'Elia is more famous than me, don't get me wrong, but they've had some pretty top-notch talent on that show, very well-known talent. And it makes me want to order some of their hot sauce, but their hot sauce is like $12 a bottle plus another $6 or $8 shipping. And I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe not. Who's Becky Hill? I thought she was a Benny Hill. Chuck says his birthday is 2 days after Valentine's Day. They saw Kevin Hart. Let's see what we have here. Hello? Hello? I thought this was going to get interesting. Oh well. Anyway, if you're looking for other great YouTube content, check out the Hot Ones channel if you haven't seen it before. I know it shows up on YouTube recommended list and stuff like that, and you know, find people that you recognize that you're familiar with, and it's just interesting to see their reaction to it. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for watching. I do intend to be back tomorrow to finish the build, and if you enjoy the video and you want to see more like it, please hit the like button, the thumbs up button there, and it'll let you know, lets the creator know you want to see more content like that. You can also hit the subscribe button if you want to be made aware of when new content is posted. Be sure to hit the bell icon so the little lines go around the bell. That turns notifications on, and that will send you an email if you want it anytime new content is posted. That's going to wrap it up for me for today. Thanks so much to all my friends in blue, keeping it civil. To my friends who are not yet blue, I look forward to turning you blue very soon. That doesn't sound right. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Bye for now.